Are you intending to share the recorded session?
That's a good question.
we do. Do we have a good way to share it? Do we have the list of participants, or we'll go ahead and try to figure out the best way to make it available.
You do have a YouTube channel.
Yeah,
yes,
we could put it out there. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm full of good ideas. I'm full of something. Just ask my friends.
glad you sat by today. Well, good. I'll go ahead and just get started, and folks who are joining us later can catch up on the recording, any of the wisdom that I dropped before they had joined. And I'll introduce myself. I'm Andreas-Kollegger. I am the Developer Tools Product Manager at Neo4j. And the goal of today is to just introduce Neo4j Desktop. Bit of an overview of Desktop first, like what it is, and then some of the specific things we've just added in 1.2.9. And then to open up to a Q&A session, actually, so we can just have an open conversation about things you like about Desktop, things you don't like, and also Neo4j in general, any other topics actually that come up are good for me. I don't mind having open-ended conversations. So the plan for the day is briefly, again, an overview of Desktop, specifically 1.2.9, and then a Q&A. And I'll note, I guess, that 1.2.9 was just released earlier today. And the way we do our release, we do kind of a soft rollout with just software updates available first. Tomorrow, anybody who's downloading from the website will get 1.2.9, but today 1.2.8 is still being downloaded from the website. So if you don't yet have 1.2.9, you can download 1.2.8 and then just restart it, and you'll get an update, and then you'll get 1.2.9. This is the least I can manage to say about what Neo4j Desktop delivers. I think it delivers a lot of fun things, but the primary goal of Neo4j Desktop really is to deliver Neo4j at the database itself. When you download Desktop is a native OS application. Technically, it's built on something called the Electron framework, and what it really does is deliver everything you need for actually getting started with Neo4j. It has the Neo4j runtime. Neo4j is based in Java, so you get a JVM so that Neo4j can run. And you actually get Neo4j Enterprise Edition. It's a special license of Enterprise Edition that's for developers only. The license is scoped for just personal use on a single machine. It's not meant for production use. But it's got all the features that you have in Enterprise, so it's pretty fantastic in that regard. Along the way, since we have a nice native application that we're delivering, we also provide some tooling through that application, most notably the Neo4j Browser and Neo4j Bloom, and also Neo4j ETL tool. If you want to, you can also then extend the desktop with some extra third-party apps. We've got a growing list of partners who have apps available, folks like GraphXR and Graphlytic Desktop. Any of those are pretty easy to access when you're running Desktop. When I get to the demo, I'll briefly show you where you can find new things. We have a kind of an app that installs apps. It's not quite an app store yet. It's a very first step towards just creating a collection of apps that we're going to expand over time and brush up a bit. So Neo4j Desktop 1.2.9. So if Neo4j Desktop primary mission is to just deliver Neo4j at the database and give you some tooling for working with the database, 1.2.9 specifically has one nice new change that wasn't previously possible, that Neo4j Bloom had been bundled previously, but now Neo4j Bloom, anybody can run it. You don't need to get a separate license. When you're running Bloom inside of just Desktop, it just works out of the box. So that's pretty fantastic. I'm not going to demo too much of Bloom today, but it's worth checking out, and it's a pretty great graph visualization tool that we have available. For the actual capabilities of Desktop itself, this is part of a long epic that we're following through on, where Desktop has always had some notion of projects, but the projects haven't been particularly useful, I think I'll admit. The idea of projects has always been that they should correlate with software development projects. And the steps that we're taking in 1.2.9 are that you can finally start to import projects, so that if you had an archive that was built that contained some files, you could import that into Desktop, and then you get a new project with those files in it. Yeah. Some of the files that are going to be available that way that are useful are things like Cypher query scripts, of course, Neo4j browser guides, but really anything that might be useful for Neo4j software development would be valid for including in a project archive.
On the incident management team.
Yeah.
So instead of just talking about those bullets, actually it's going to be a lot easier for me to just show what's possible today. And if I could ask people when you join, Zoom isn't so great about this at the moment, but if you join in, could you take the time to mute? Unless you've got a question you want to raise.
Not really, but.
So I'm not sure who, I'm getting some noise right now from somebody's channel.
I don't really know who exactly is speaking, but if everyone is okay with it, I'll just mute those who are not muted, including myself. Thanks.
Cool. Okay, so I'll switch over to desktop itself, and we'll go through the demo portion. Desktop recently just got, actually in the previous release, we introduced having what we're calling a first use graph and a first use project. We keep changing the name of this first project because, well, really it's me that I keep changing my mind about like what this project should be called. I'm open to suggestions if you think you have some good ideas about what this project should be called out of the box. This project is meant to make it easy to just get started with Neo4j if you've downloaded it for the very first time. It includes a pre-populated movie database, our classic movie set, but already installed into a database it's running, as you can see here. And it also includes a couple of files, a Neo4j browser guide, and also the entire Cypher script that's used for creating that movie database as a separate file. The browser guide itself actually has been improved a little bit. If you've seen this before, browser guides are kind of a built-in pseudo slide deck type operation that's available inside of browser. And this one just explains what the movie graph is and then explains some things you can do with the movie graph. It's been enhanced with this new form-based interface so that if you see queries like this is a query in Cypher for just finding a person by their name and returning that person. It's now form-based, so if I instead want to look for, I have a very limited range of Toms that I know that are actors. So if I want to look for Tom Cruise instead, the query gets updated with whatever I've typed there, which makes this a really convenient way to just kind of update queries. All of the queries inside of this guide have been updated to take advantage of the forms. And this is something we want to try to do a little bit more of, is expand what's possible inside of browser guides. As I mentioned, the browser guides, when we first thought about them and first added them to Neo4j Browser, we had a few different use cases in mind, and I think we've done okay at the built-in documentation part of it, and in some of the demonstration parts of it that you can see different Cypher queries and how to use those Cypher queries. So as a learning tool and as a documentation tool, it's been pretty nice. But the interactivity has been pretty limited, and we'd always intended to do something like what we have here with the forms. And we're thinking about other interactivity that would be possible. And of course, we're taking a lot of inspiration these days from the world of data science notebooks, trying to think what features from data science notebooks might be useful to incorporate inside of Neo4j Browser. Later, when we get to the Q&A session, if you've got any requests in that area, things you'd love to see to be possible inside of a Neo4j Browser guide, I'd love to hear about it. And I guess I should mention that along the way, one of the things that's not really easy to do right now, even though this browser guide happens to be available as a file, creating browser guides isn't so easy. So we're also looking at the format of browser guides, making it easier to edit them so that the content is just pure content and maybe some components that have some interaction instead of what they are today, which is HTML with some class files you have to know about. That's a bit awkward to actually work with. But this amount of interactivity alone is already a nice step forward, and we're going to keep adding to the capabilities of browser guides. The next thing that I'd like to show actually then is what's possible with the project imports. The project sidebar over here has always had a button for creating new projects. It now has a little drop-down option here for what will be an expanding set of context menu type actions you can run. The first one is that you can import a project from the file. So if I choose that, and I haven't even downloaded the file yet. Let me do that first. Right, so we've started to make better use of a GitHub repository for Neo4j Desktop. The latest desktop release, 1.2.9, out on GitHub, actually has the release notes, and we've also taken the time to start adding some useful files out here. So I've got a sample project that's attached that's called Northwind that I just downloaded. This is the exact same Northwind you would get if you ran the Neo4j Browser guide and created from CSVs from scratch. Somehow that's not seen. Oh, there it goes, okay. So importing that, the file name gets preserved in total right now, but we do unzip the file and reveal the contents. At the moment, the Neo4j Browser guides and the Cypher files and the CSV all have to be at the top level of the archive. We don't yet support subfolders or any kind of a nesting structure. That's something that we'll be looking to do in the future. But for now, it's already convenient that you can, as you can see, this has got all of the CSV files you need for creating the Northwind graph. And it also has some Cypher scripts for loading those CSV files. And hidden somewhere here is a browser guide. This is basically the same content, as I mentioned, that you get in Neo4j Browser, but then separated out into individual files, which makes it easier to take this stuff and use it yourself or modify it in your own projects. If I take a look at, let's say where's the load Northwind one? There's a big one. Oh, it's of course this one here. This is one giant Cypher script that goes through a couple of things. If I put this into full page mode, you can see that it starts off by setting a bunch of parameters. Those parameters are really just pointing out to the URLs. By default here, actually, these are actually using still the URLs that are hosted on the web. But any of these URLs could instead be changed to the files that are now included inside of desktop. Let's say if we want to take this customer's CSV file and use that one instead, if I use the little hamburger, dot menu here, I can get the URL for this CSV file. And which one did I grab? The customer's one. So I could replace this customer's one with that path, which you can see is just hosted by a local web server that is running inside of Neo4j Desktop. The file path is not very pretty right now, but this is the same project with a bit of a GUID instead of the project name, and then the customer's .csv file itself. And with that done, I could do that to any of these other CSV files as well. And then it's just a bunch of load CSV scripts that run some indexes that created all in a big multi-statement way. So if I run that with any luck, and if the demo gods are with me, I'll get check marks for all of the statements that they all went successfully. And I now have the Northwind data set loaded in. This is the kind of interaction and workflow that we're looking to make easier and easier over time. And I'd be really curious to hear how people interact with desktop today and whether this kind of file-based interactions is going to be helpful. I know that there are a few limitations to this, of course. One is that for desktop to work with the files, you actually have to move the files from wherever you have them on the file system into desktop. And even so, though, I think some of the interactions that we have that are available are going to be pretty nice. The last thing then that I want to show, so let's see, we've got the browser guides, you've got the CSV files. Oh, right, and I clearly just made a mistake, and that's something that I just added that to the movie data set, didn't I? Yes, I've got movies, people, and products. Great, I've managed to combine my two databases. So that's good. That's actually a good note to self that we should do something about double checking which database you're loading. If you've used Neo4j before, you know that for most Neo4j databases out of the box, so if I switch to this other project and create a database here, create a local one, I can call this whatever I want to. So I could create a Northwind database and give the password. But the database that's created, it's really an entire DBMS install that is represented by this tile here. And the way the desktop works, it really has a one-to-one ratio of for every DBMS, you have one database. A long body of work that we have underway right now is to take advantage of multi-database, which is now possible in Neo4j 4.0, that a single DBMS can host multiple databases. Desktop doesn't yet expose that in its UI, but that's one of the things that we're taking a look at how to actually integrate. So with this database now created, if I start this one up, actually I'll do a few things. If I'm not sure if everyone's had a chance to play around with Neo4j 4.0 and the multi-database features, but it's something that has really made a nice difference. One thing I'll do is I'll switch over to the system database and I'll create a new database called Northwind. And then I'll use Northwind. And you'll see that the prompt here, of course, has changed to reflect the database that I've chosen to work with. And that's what I wasn't careful about paying attention to earlier when I ran the create script. Now that I've created my Northwind database, I can go ahead and run this whole thing again. And all of that should end up running, but on the Northwind data set. And so now I don't have movies and people from the movie data set intermingled. So that's a little bit nicer. Cool, so that was actually the whirlwind tour of the new features inside of Neo4j Desktop 1.2.9. I'm trying to think if there's what else I intended to walk through. Let me just check my notes here. The file operations, Neo4j browser guides, and the project archives. Right, okay. So that is the entirety of my new demo. And I'd actually love to take any questions if people have them about desktop itself, about Neo4j in general, or any other topics that come to mind.
So just feel free to type anything in the group chat.
And I think maybe with this number of, yeah, that's right. I think the chat makes sense. How can I see this chat? What is my screen resolution? That's a great question. I asked my iMac to scale to the large size. macOS no longer tells you the screen dimensions. They just have large, small, and normal, or something like that, semantic sizes. How do you integrate to external applications? So that's a great question. And I guess that could mean a few different things. If you mean external sort of native applications, one of the things that desktop has the ability to manage is something we call deep links, that if you have URLs of, actually, I think I might be able to show that. Let's see what happens when I do this in the Chrome bar, actually. So if I say Neo4j Desktop, Neo4j Browser, with any luck, this will actually run, oh, it's asking to run the Canary version of desktop because I switched over to that assignment. But so whether it's the Canary or the normal version of desktop, you can actually create URLs that will launch Neo4j Desktop and then launch graph apps that are inside of desktop. This one didn't partly worked. Let me go back to Chrome and try this again. No, Chrome, I wasn't trying to search for that. Okay, so my demo ability of that is pretty limited. So that's the first way to actually do the integration, is that you can create links. So now once desktop is up and running, links can actually link into Browser, Bloom, and other graph apps. And then depending on what you've passed in as the path, you could, for instance, ask Browser to show a browser guide or to load up a Cypher query. That's the one way to do integrations with desktop. Go ahead. You could also mean for integrating external applications, it could be that you're asking about adding graph applications themselves. So as an example, actually now I'm running the Canary, but I've created a desktop app called Graphical Graph App, which is just the GraphQL editor, but wrapped inside of a graph app so that it runs in desktop. When you do that, when your app runs, you actually get access to, essentially get an access token that lets you access the desktop APIs, that lets you do things like access the file IO API, find out what databases are currently running, and actually get authentication credentials for those databases, which is one of the reasons why we have a bit of tight control over graph apps and how they're installed. But once you've allowed a graph app to be installed and you've given it permission for getting access to the API, then it has all the same access that Neo4j Browser or Neo4j Bloom do. So if you mean integrating external applications in that way, it's basically building a graph app. And if you have more questions about that, then I'd be happy to go into more detail. Today downloaded and got 128. Yeah, that's right. So the download from Neo4j.com is still for Neo4j Desktop 128. In our soft rollout, we only have 129 available as a software update. It's not yet available as the default download from Neo4j.com. Tomorrow is when we'll update Neo4j.com. If you'd like to get 129 today, you should be able to prompt for a software update. So if I switch over to normal desktop, you can say, ask it to check for updates, and it should run a check, and then it'll let you know whether it finds an update that's available here in the notification center. For me, of course, I already have 129, so it doesn't show me anything, but you should be able to get that. Do all databases need to have a password? Yeah, they all do have a password, and when you create the databases, and maybe I walked through that quickly, but I'll do it again here in this project. If I create a local database, you give it a name, and you set the initial password. This is actually the admin password as part of the initial installation of the database. How would integration with GitHub work? So that's an interesting question. And I don't have a firm answer on that right now. We're exploring a few different opportunities for that. The easiest way, and I think maybe the preferred way to integrate with GitHub, is to not integrate with GitHub directly, but to let people use GitHub for whatever workflows that they've got in their normal file system, and allow desktop to actually get access to your work folders wherever they happen to be on disk. As mentioned before, one of the limitations of working with desktop right now is that it manages its own file space, kind of hidden in its own file directory. Moving projects so that projects are available in user space, I think would be the best way to integrate with GitHub, so that as far as desktop is concerned, it doesn't actually know the difference whether it's a GitHub project or not. It just has a directory of source that it can get access to. The other thing that we are looking at, I think a little bit longer term, is that we would add the ability directly into desktop to be able to access GitHub repositories and possibly create projects or other things from them. Can we install Arrow? Well, that's another really great question. Arrow, if people are familiar with it, is a really nice diagramming tool that currently is available as a web-hosted app. There's what we're currently calling classical arrows. It's been around for a while. Hasn't been updated to work inside of Neo4j Desktop, but there's been some renewed interest in trying to carry that forward and actually make arrows available as a graph app. When we take that step, it'll actually show up in the graph app gallery, and you'll be able to install it directly. So any new apps that we're aware of that are available for Neo4j Desktop get added to this graph apps gallery. This is itself really just a graph app that shows what's currently available. Things like Halen, which is a really nice monitoring and management tool from Neo4j, this Graph Data Science Playground, and a bunch of other things. So when Arrows becomes available, it'll get another tile here, and you'll be able to just click and install. So for instance, if I want to install Halen, I would just click that button. Halen has not been signed by us, so you get an extra verification step here. We say, let's go ahead and install it anyway. And then Halen is available just like any other app is. So we're looking at Arrows being integrated in exactly the same way. So once that's possible, we'll have an announcement about it. You'll be able to grab it right from the Graph Apps gallery. Offline mode, that's a really great question. Offline mode mostly is a source of confusion, is I think the right answer for what is offline mode. That wasn't our intention with it. Offline mode really is about whether or not Neo4j Desktop can get access to the public internet in order to get software updates and to install new software like Arrows or Halen or anything else that's available. What's unfortunate about the current behavior is that when we check for software updates that are available, if we're not able to get to the internet, rather than just giving up on that particular update, we switch over to offline mode, which means that we stop checking, because we didn't want to have, we were concerned about having too much network traffic when we knew the network wasn't available. But of course, we don't go back online after we've forced ourselves into offline mode. So the offline mode is really about us not checking for software updates. It's a bit distracting because it doesn't mean that there's no network access at all. so that if you still are using Neo4j or using desktop with a local on-premise Neo4j, that still works fine, even though you're on offline mode. Offline mode only affects software updates. It doesn't affect being able to access Neo4j itself. So it's a bit confusing by name and also in behavior, and it is one of the things we're looking to improve in the next few releases. Will importing database dumps work? Yes, it will. We're really looking forward to that. Of all the different file types that we have available today, one of the definitely high value ones is being able to take dump files so that they would appear just here, the same as you see all the other files, and that you'll be able to create a database from that dump file. We're expecting to be able to do both things, both create dump files from the existing one. So this Northwind database, I should be able to click somewhere and then create a dump file from that. And then later, if I have a dump file, I should be able to grab it and create a database from there. I'd like to integrate Node-era, which is a data modeling tool. Oh, that sounds really interesting. I'm not familiar with Node-era, but if that's something you're interested in doing, I would be very happy to help you out with that and figure out the best way to integrate Node-era. So please feel free to reach out to me. The easiest way to do that is for me to go back to my overview here. I'm at @kollegger most places where there are user handles. So on GitHub, on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and other places like that. Or it's just andreas@neo4j.com. You can send me an email as well. So I'd be happy to help out with you, John S., or anybody else who's interested in doing some application integrations with desktop. Please reach out to me. That would be good to hear about. And oh, okay, yes, good. I'm glad that worked out for you. Okay, I'm sorry about the confusion around offline mode, but I'm glad that I was able to clear that up and you were able to get 129. Cool, there aren't any other questions at the moment. So if I can pose a question to you, and I would love to hear any ideas around this. Earlier when I was doing the demo, I talked about the current capabilities of Neo4j browser guides. And to touch base on that again, actually, I think the other project is a bit more helpful. When we first created Neo4j browser, we had a couple of different reference points in mind. The first thing I think that's obvious about it is that it has sort of a shell-like REPL type feel to it, where you have a little command bar that you enter in commands, and then you get the results in a stream. Of course, we've turned it around so that if you had like a bash shell or something, you're always at the bottom of the screen and things are scrolling to the top. We've inverted the order there so that you're entering at the top and then results come in at the bottom. That was one design decision about what browser was. We very specifically wanted to have it be a sort of a REPL environment on steroids. And soon after we had that, we were interested in trying to figure out how to have rich content. And the easy, I guess, reference there is like if you're using bash, you're used to being able to call commands and ask for help on those commands, and maybe load up man pages. There's a lot of things you can do just from a text environment. So we thought, okay, what's the kind of the web-based version of that? And we thought about having mini web pages that you could load up, which basically ended up becoming browser guides. That we just want to have mini websites where you could have multiple pages, and they worked more or less like a slide deck. And that on that slide deck, we could have images and code snippets, and then some explanations, around that stuff to explain anything. So between the help system that you can pull up and the browser guides, that was our first step at like having some rich content. That was actually useful enough that, for better or worse, we didn't take any more time to like improve on the initial implementation of that stuff. When we first introduced this, I remember getting a lot of feedback from people who were familiar with IPython notebooks, which was one of the earlier version of notebooks, data science notebooks. And people said, oh, wow, this is kind of like IPython notebooks. Maybe you should think about adding a bit more interactivity. Maybe it'd be nice to be able to tie a query that you've run, the results from one, pass it into another one. And at the time, that all sounded really interesting to us, but we didn't really follow through on trying to do much more. But now we're returning to those ideas. We're returning to those conversations. Data science notebooks are everywhere. There's, of course, Jupyter notebooks. There's the Zeppelin notebooks. There's Observable HQ, which is a fantastic resource and community. And I'm interested in doing two things, or a few different things. On the one hand, I'd love to make it easier for people to use all those other notebook environments and connect to Neo4j and make that as easy as possible. But in addition to that, we'd love to take what we already have inside of Neo4j Browser and the capabilities there and have a Neo4j Cypher-specific data science notebook of sorts. And so we're trying to think about different ways to make that possible. There's some evidence of this if you look at, actually, is it here immediately? No. So if you've ever worked with Neo4j and running Cypher queries, you know that when you write a Cypher query, like if you look at this one here, matching a person where the n.name equals $name. This $name tells Cypher to look for the value here as a property that gets passed in along with the query itself. To set those properties or those parameters inside of Browser, use this :param command. And the way the :param command actually works is that, like, so if I said param name, I'm gonna have to remember name again. And I'll just go back to Tom Cruise. So if I set the name to Tom Cruise, we actually evaluate this string here by passing it to Cypher and having it return the value, which means that all of the values that are set as parameters are valid Cypher property types or value types, right? We expanded that a little bit, and let's see if there's a good example here. No, I think we have to look at the other help page. We've expanded that so that it's actually possible to, since what we're doing is just evaluating some Cypher, we said, okay, great. What would be fun to do is allow that same pattern, but have something that looks sort of like a Lambda that you would say, all right, actually, I want this param X to be the result of actually literally running this Cypher statement. And so now, oh, I guess I could have renamed the Cypher. So let's see, as great. And so now I've assigned X to actually something that has some depth to it because this is actually returned from Cypher itself. And I can evaluate any kind of Cypher you want to. That's the first step towards having some interesting interactions where you can take some Cypher queries, have them actually set to some parameter values, and then use those parameters to be passed into subsequent Cypher queries. And now I'll actually return to looking at group chat and back to my question, say, that sort of interaction, does that sound like it's actually useful to you? Would you use it if we had that kind of thing? And I'll go back and look at speaking of shell-like feeling. Right, enable multi-statement query editor default. Yeah, so I'm glad you feel that way, Veronica. And actually it should now be the default. If you already had Neo4j Browser, it'll stay with the same setting that it had. But now if you run Neo4j Browser for the first time, the multi-statement query editor is turned on by default. So it is not a default mode for new installs at least. Oh, that's a really great suggestion. Yeah, I totally agree with you. The app gallery does not take advantage of recognizing the apps that you already have. Yeah, that's a great call. You should definitely try to make that improvement so you can just see what's new. And then at least, yeah, see the ones you already have as well. And if there's any updates, I guess, for that. Terry, you think that would be useful to have taking results from one query, adding them to another one? Okay, that's good to hear. And can we create a JSON object string for multiple params? Kind of. So not literally JSON, because as you know, like literal JSON requires the property keys, even though, and this is a bit distracting, when Neo4j Browser shows you the current value of the parameters. So if you just say, sorry, params, you see all of the values that have been set, and this is legitimate JSON because it's got quotes over the strings. To set values, we use Cypher, and Cypher doesn't use proper JSON because, of course, in Cypher land, all of the keys are not used with double quotes or even single quotes. It's just the naked identifier and then set to a value. So it's more like object literals in JavaScript than it is JSON. Cool. Any other questions or thoughts? And at this point, really, I'm open to any other conversations you'd like to have.
I just want to say also that there will be a very short survey after this call. I would really appreciate if you would answer. There's like literally like 6 questions, and some of them also about what Andreas is talking about now. So if you get more thoughts about parameters, browser guides, all those things, you can also address them in this survey. I will post a link on the chat.
Andreas, can you hear me?
I can, Mark, yeah.
I wanted to give you just a bit of feedback pursuant to my display setting.
Oh yeah, okay.
Your screen resolution from a Windows perspective is 1600 by 1200.
Okay, that sounds like it's still really huge.
It is huge. I'm normally a 12 by 800. Yeah, 1200 by 800 screen resolution. Let me verify that. Yeah, 1200 by 800. And when I was viewing your screen at that setting on one of my monitors, oh, it looked, the characters were terrible. So if somebody gives you feedback saying they can't read your screen, the text on your screen, ask them to up their resolution. And this is the first one that I found that when increasing the resolution, this is the first one that I found that makes your text readable.
Okay, that's great to know.
I'm gonna pass that along to Dev Relations next week. But if you're doing any more between now and whenever, check to make sure that people can actually read the text, and if not, suggest they may increase their screen resolution.
Okay, that's a good call. And that resolution is tricky if you're on an iPhone. Right? Yeah, absolutely. I hadn't thought about that. If people are dialing in on a phone using the Zoom app there, this is going to be impossible to actually follow. Okay, great feedback from both of you, both with you, Mark, and also George. Thank you both. I'll look to improve that when I have another one of these review sessions. Great. Okay. Well, this is maybe a little bit brief today. I wasn't sure whether I would take a lot more time with the demos or if we'd have a lot of conversations. I do appreciate all the questions that have come in, and for sure, if you have any thoughts that occur to you after this, once you actually download 129, don't hesitate to reach out to me directly. I'm on the Neo4j Slack, the Neo4j user Slack as well. You can reach me there if you want to. And I'm happy to either help out with things or to also certainly get the feedback. All right. Thank you everybody for coming in today. Oh yeah, what's the best way to get a Slack link?
Yeah, it's just Neo4j-users. Let's see if I can send it over.
So it should be true if you just go to neo4j-users.slack.com. That should work.
That should work.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And yeah, again, please answer the survey. Would really appreciate your feedback. And if you would like us to reach out more to you personally, and if you have a lot of feedback that you just don't have time or if we can spend too much effort typing it in the survey, we would be really happy just to chat with you over another call as a group or personally. Thanks, Andreas.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your day and evenings, and we'll see you next time.